Page 12, Y.M.C.A. Disco music. This is interesting. This was a big hit a long time ago, back when I was in college and I worked part-time as a DJ in a skating rink, and we used to play a lot of these pieces, and this was one of the ones they just loved to get out there and dance to on roller skates. This is good grief. But let's talk about it a bit. Again, it's a vocal piece for a music group, and they're trying to make a piano solo arrangement, and it's a little lacking, but we'll deal with what they have. At the beginning, in the right hand, these chords, the melody's the top note. If you can, bring it out. So 1 and 2 and 3. By the way, this is in the key of G major. Oh, it's morning. I'm all over the place. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... See the tied notes in the second measure? The left hand's going to help because it's got pulsating eighth notes. And you can tell by how the notes line up in each staff which note in the right hand gets played with which note in the left hand. So keep your left hand steady and your right hand can just match along, but that's what it is. But second measure again. Now if you can, I would recommend the fingering for the last two notes in the second measure is a 2 on the B and then a 1, 2, 4 for the chord. That way your fifth finger is ready for the next chord. So the second measure going on into the third measure would be that. Same thing on the first measure of the second line. You're playing a C instead of a B in the second measure, but the fingering is still with the 5. Just using third finger instead of second. And then going on, and that they say 1, 2, 1. That's okay. There's other possible fingerings we could use. Just go with what they've got is fine. All of these are sort of disconnected. None of this is really legato yet because this thing bounces. So third line is accents. 1 and yes, it's an F sharp. Remember, there's this key of G major F sharps. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So that first measure, the third line. Yeah, just count it out really careful, and if it'll help, just temporarily take out the ties and just play all the notes. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And once you understand that, then put the tie back in. You think playing the second note in the tie, but you just hang on to the first note. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1. It goes back up to that pattern that repeats forever. You get the same rhythm down in the last line on the second measure going into the third measure. And matching it up with the left hand not only doesn't help very much, it actually is more complicated, and I'll talk about that when I get to the left hand. So try and get this rhythm in the right hand. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Then going on to 13, page 13. The notes are here, but there's a note above the staff saying both hands an octave lower. So instead of here, we're going to here. We're just going to pretend middle C went down an octave on the keyboard is all. It's here, so. And for the third measure there, I recommend the fingering is 2 or 3. Actually, 3 works better. 5, 3, 5, 4, 3, 2. I don't have to cross over the thumb. So again, the fingering in the third measure is 3, 5, 3, 5, 4. So for the last B, I just bring the fourth finger down and play it. Now the last measure, going into the first measure of the next line, is the rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. See, it's tied over so that you're playing on the end of the beat. So that's always fun, playing on ands. Then the 8VA thing, the dotted line ends at that measure, or the pickup, it ends on the first 3 beats of that measure. Just, it goes away. And then, so you're back up where you were here for that. Just a nice light wrist action. Rhythm. First measure, third line, page 13. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We keep playing on the ands. Again, you can take out the tie, it might help a little. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Eventually you got to put the tie back in because it's important. It's just, sometimes it helps to feel the rhythm a little better if you take out the tie, because it's not so syncopated. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. And eventually you put the tie back in. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. You'll get it. Last measure of the third line, again the fingering is the same as above. Third finger, and for the last B, bring the fourth finger down to play it. Because that way you don't have to cross over the thumb. Yeah. Then, fourth line down, second measure, you're ending that phrase, then you're coming up here, and that 8VA above it, that actually applies to the bottom staff of the other up above. It is not to this staff. You play this where it's written. And watch this fingering. I like this fingering. It's 5, 4, and then 2, 4, 5. Because we want to be in this position, so that in the next, when the next chord comes along, we're in this position. We just need a sharp, just is all. And we're going to stay in this position throughout here. So the last 2 measures of that line is and then you can play third finger on that last note of that line, because now we're back into this. And the rhythm, we've had this before, 2 lines above it, is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. And the next measure, staccato, these are on the beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then and bring out the top note if you can. It really helps if you can bring out the melody note. It sure does. Left hand is just a lot of this pulsating eighth notes going on. It just keeps the rhythm going. You're playing the part of the trap set of the drums. Not staccato, not real short, just detached. I mean, that is staccato, but it's not a short staccato. It's just it's a long staccato. And I'm bouncing. I'm just having fun with this. Second measure, last note, that's an F sharp. Going down to the E for the next measure. And first measure, second line, at the end of that, that's a D. Going down to the C. Isn't that fun? Now the really fun part, you're just going to love this. Third line, first 2 measures. Watch these carefully. Good exercise for that and learning to do it is play it all legato. Forget the accents, just get the notes. There, and you get a feel for it, and then you can go back and separate them. And then you can put in the accents. last note in the second measure there on that line? Because now you're coming back up here. Octaves again. So it's when you go to put the other hand with it, things get interesting. So I'll come back to that in a minute. Now you're back to these pulsating octaves again. Then you get down to the bottom, the second, third measure is the same thing. It says on these, the last measure of that line, these accented notes, if you want to use fifth on them, fine. I prefer to use some other fingers and alternating, like 3-1, 3-1. I might use fifth on the first one to get me there, and then I can use 3-1 after that, whatever, it doesn't matter, because you end it at the top of page 13, and now you got to go down an octave. Instead of here, you got to go here. So remember the note up above, both hands an octave lower? So now you're down here. If your keyboard isn't big enough for that, then you can't do that. But if you have enough keys, go down. So now you're down here. And then follow the notes. First measure of the second line, your E here, F sharp, G, and then the 8VA ends. So G sharp, you're already there. I mean, the notes look like they dropped an octave, but you've been an octave lower, so you're already there. So that works out. So the second measure is an octave, and then fifth finger for the next measure. But this is not an octave, that's a G. Look out. And then next measure is D. And you're back into the octaves again. Isn't this fun? Well, go down third line, third measure. There's an 8VA under the bottom staff. Now remember the rule for 8VA. If it's above the staff, you go up. If it's below the staff, you go down. Or there could be a note like there's at the top of the page telling you what to do. Well, there's no note here. The 8VA is under the staff. So we take the left hand down, only the left hand. So instead of here, you're coming here. So the second measure of that third line, you're here. Just go down. And stay down there until the second measure of the fourth line, where you're here. And then the 8VA ends, that dotted line ends, so the last beat, that G sharp, where you're already down here. So it works out. It's exactly the same as it was before. You're fine there. Then the last line, you're here, first measure, and then the second measure. Again, bounce these. And then the last two measures in the left hand, the 8VA came back. So now instead of here, you're down here. And again, bounce them. Detach them. Separate them. You know the drill. So then you get all that worked out one hand at a time. Now you go to put the hands together, and nothing works. That's typical. If you do it the way I do it, nothing works. So you take it really super slow. And at the beginning, I'm just going to go 1 and 2 and 3. See, when you go slow, parts of it is going to be really boring. That's okay. Deal with it, because the hard part's coming. So boring is good for a bit. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now notice I'm separating the eighth notes. I'm not necessarily separating the quarter notes. That's a habit. I mean, at first you might do it because I'm not into interpreting it yet. But to me, it's just a habit. So that last quarter note on the second measure in the right hand, that accented one, I tend to hang on to that a little longer. So otherwise, I'm separating the right hand to match what the left hand is doing. Second line. So hang on to the tied notes. Third line, here it comes. So it's sort of going with the left hand, but good luck. So here we're 2. See, the accents, fortunately, are falling together for both hands, so it's here. 1 and 2, bump that thing, and you can go as slow as you need to. Just. Same thing at the bottom of the page there on the bottom line. The second, third measures is exactly the same way. Now let's go over to page 13 at the top, because you're ending here. So watch that one carefully. The last measure of the first line going into the first measure of the second line. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. So that's a little tricky. So work that rhythm out and you'll get it eventually. And then the right hand comes up while the left hand is doing its thing. So you're going to have this left hand more or less automatic. So you concentrate on getting the right hand where it goes, because it's got to go from here to here. So it's the first measure is second line. See, and then you're ready to go on. So the rhythm and the third line down, first measure, we've had this rhythm before, haven't we? No? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So the left hand is just a whole note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And then the left hand goes down. And again, while the left hand is doing this, you got to get your right hand up there. So be ready with that one. Fun piece. And once you kind of have a handle on it and you're kind of beginning to feel it a little bit, you can turn it into music. And you got to work on the notes and the rhythms and all the mechanical junk and get that out of the way. Then you can start having fun with it. Yeah, and it's just cool. It says fast, and you can find recordings of this, and yes, it's pretty fast. It's almost like cut time, except we don't want to feel 2 beats. We want to feel all 4. We just want to feel a fast 4. Now, as far as the articulation goes, you'll have to experiment with it. I tend to want to do both hands the same way. So at the beginning, if I'm doing detached in the left, I want to do detached in the right. But in reality, the right hand probably should be more legato. If you can do legato in the right and detached in the left, I don't know. Well, at the bottom, the last measure on page 12, you're here. Well, the next part on the right hand is an octave lower, so you're already where you need to be. It's just right there, so it's here. in here on page 13. In my opinion, it's better without pedal. You don't need any pedal in this because we want this kind of bounciness going along. But it does provide some contrast. Look at the second line on page 13. Starting with the second measure, it would be overlapping pedal throughout it. I don't care for it, but if you want to use it, you go right ahead. I'm not really going to show it because it's just plain old overlapping pedal. But I'll leave that up to you. But this could be a fun piece to play eventually, if you can get it learned. It's kind of hard, but yeah.